offset a little bit. So all of our cutting tools have to be offset. It's a bit like cutting through an apple or whatever. If you don't go all the way through, it's still one piece. So we have to make sure about that.
Okay.
Then we're going to mark this gum line. So this is part of the procedure, and it turns pink. And again, it has been offset. And then we're going to go into the contact area, select one of the vertices, click offset, and which then offsets the contact vertices. So we're going to thread this through the contact carefully, like something like that. It takes a little bit of practice, but before you know, you'll get the hang of it. And then we're going to join it on the other side.
So again,
by pressing
this one's not to contact the adjacent teeth as such.
Yeah, so the cutting tools are above the surface of the model. So here we're going to do that again. Offset contact line, E to extrude, and threading it through the contact. So these contacts are sometimes very tricky. You can see how curved the contact actually is. And we'd like to get a good cut. So again, just be mindful that you don't intersect the model, the surface of the model. Going to join that on the other side, something like that. And then after that, we're going to click section tooth, and that's going to make our cutting tool. So you can give it a quick inspection to see that all of the vertices are above where they're above the surface of the model. And then we're going to click on cut. Okay. And this now has successfully cut off our unit. So if I go G, we can see here. So this, and it has been socketed slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some object management, and we need to always get into the habit of object management, because sometimes we can have 100 objects on the right hand side, and if we don't do object management, we're going to get hopelessly lost. Object management is done by colors. Colors is really good because it's a visual aid to see which color it is, and naming them is another good one, and putting them in certain collections. Now collections are like layers or whatever in Photoshop, so we're going to put this one by clicking on M. We're going to move this into a collection, and I'll just call them lower teeth, and we're going to click OK, and that will pop up here, lower teeth, and we're going to hide these teeth. So we don't need to see them at this stage. Okay, so they're gone. Then I'm going to pursue in getting a nice mesh for this model, because if we're making a partial immediate, we'd like to have a nice solid structural model. So by clicking on that, we're going to click on Sculpt, and then we're going to give it a quick sculpt, just to smooth it down a little bit. Okay, like something like that. So we're looking after our meshes so that we can print these models nicely and there's no issues with anything. And the contact area has also been nicely smoothed down. All right, so I think that's about it. And then we're going to exit this. If you get lost, please look at your tooltips. They appear for 200 seconds. And that's enough to grab a drink of water or whatever. So it'll just tell you, then exit. So you can get lost. It is a possibility. Even I get lost sometimes. So we're going to click on exit. So now what we have is we've got our teeth, which are over here, and we've got our edentulous model. Now what we need to do, in order to fit a denture, for example, we need to block out this model. And this is standard laboratory procedure. We'd go now and take wax and whatever, survey it and block it out. So that would be the next step. So we're going to go to the block out module, and we're going to go up and we're going to name this lower because it's a lower model, and we're going to create an offset. Now this offset model is by default 0.2 millimeters bigger. If you're milling something, you could make it smaller, so it depends on your print and your resin. I would, the 0.2 seems to be quite good, and bear in mind that this then would become your fitting surface. So the bigger you make it, the looser, the denture would actually become. So just keep that in mind, okay? We're going to apply that. And then what this does, it takes this blue transparent model and it makes a new model. Okay, and we're going to finish this. So this is called the offset model. And if you say, for example, making a mouth guard with flexible material, this is the one that you would use because you want to engage all the undercuts. Okay. Following that, we're going to go down to the lower, block out lower, and we're going to survey this model. And here we can get a good bird's eye view of the path of insertion. And we do this in the lab as well, but in the lab we would then have like a table, a survey table. We usually look at it from the top. We just have to see where a good path of insertion and withdrawal is. Here I'm looking at this side, on the lingual side. Also I'm looking at the contact areas of those canines. We don't want it too far like this or too far. So this takes a little bit of practice. So following that, we can mark these lower undercuts and we can see where they are. So, all right, now then we would click on create passive model, but because that's a little bit of a wait, like a minute and a half, I will just call up a new file instead. So file, open, and that's a blocked teeth. No, that's the wrong one. Oh gosh, don't tell me. Yeah, thank goodness. All right, so this is what it would look like after pressing that button. Now this is a completely passive model. This one you would use for implant guides because you don't want them to engage in any undercuts. You'd also use them for ortho bands. We can make ortho bands on this specific model because it's just passive, and we've called it passive model lower for this specific one. So are there any questions so far? Wolfgang, maybe you've got a question that you can think of?
No, I don't really have a question on this. Maybe you can just elaborate why we have to remesh every time that we do an offset model, for example. What is the purpose
All right,
of remeshing? Even though we
we've
passed
got
that point, yeah.
So we do the remeshing. It's part of the procedure because when we have tiny components, say for example, we want to block out an orthodontic clasp, attachment clasp. It is so small that if we're going with a 0.2 millimeter voxel size, that the entire model is distorted. So even for crown and bridge dies, for example, we'd need to remesh the voxel size at very, very small, like 0.03 or something. So this is why we've got this procedure, and it depends on how big your objects are. But for a model, we've got it set at the default value.
So the smaller the voxel remesh, the higher the resolution in some sense.
Yeah, indeed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so with the partial denture, we would then go to the adjust dynamic undercuts. And that's what this does, is brings us an undercut model. And this is a proposal, and the offset for this orange model is a negative 0.4 millimeters. Now we can adjust that depending on how much undercut we want to expose. Now I would say if you're doing the auto default models, it's minus 0.4, which may be a little bit much for, and maybe the undercuts may be too deep for a denture, I would say. So maybe go through this procedure, the manual procedure, and maybe minus 0.1 is
Michael, ideally we want to engage
better.
undercuts on the buccal side rather than both sides. Lingual and buccal might prevent, you know,
Yeah,
so
and
just
unless you've
keeping,
got like a flipper, like an anterior tooth, for example, and you're relying on the palatal undercuts to clip it into position, I would
okay.
say, yeah, yeah. Otherwise, this poor person may not get the denture.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's very similar to laboratory procedure where we would sort of make a
yeah.
judgment call on how much undercuts to use.
All right, so they're hardly blocked out at the moment, so we're going to leave it at that, and we're going to then apply the offset. Following this, will be given the opportunity to sculpt these undercuts. It would say sculpt undercuts if needed. So let's just go into that and sculpt these undercuts. So what that does, there's a minus and a plus on the top. So at the moment, the default is set to minus. I can clean this model up a little bit, something like that. Also, what we can do is we can expose a little bit of more undercut. So assuming this would be a Valplast appliance, for example, we can use the blender tools, the sculpting tools if we want to, or we can use the one that we have, which is quite good. The one on the top left-hand side, it makes like a wedge. So it cuts like a wedge in there, which is quite nice because when we're blocking out for chrome cobalts, for example, we usually take an instrument and we carve that out nicely so we can actually put a clasp or something in there. So if we want to add, for example, we can just click on add and we can go to the blob tool here. There's quite a few inflate or blob. I quite like the blob, which works very well. Put this on plus and we can then add a little bit of more if we want to. Okay. So once we're done with the sculpting, we would then create the retentive model. So we click on that. Okay, and that gives us a model at 0.2 voxel, and we're going to finish this model. And now this becomes our fitting model for our denture. This is our inside model. Okay. Now, is there a question?
No, I've just muted for temporarily.
Mm. All right, so we're going to go to the Splint module. Now, the Splint module is not only for splints. This is why we have renamed it to Splint in Layers, because it does way more than splints. In this case, for example, we're using it to make a denture. Yeah. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the layer, paint on layer. And we're working with two objects now, which is the target model, which is our fitting model, and we're working with the layer. So the entire Splint module works with two models, two objects. So we're going to call this target model, and then we're going to start painting. Now this is pretty cool because we click on paint, and that brings up like a brush, and we can then paint on a layer. Now, to make the denture, we need two layers. We need one as a cutting tool to cut our models and offset them away from the model, because we'd like to have pink denture material underneath our teeth. So we're going to make two layers, and the second layer is for our actual base for our denture. So this first layer I'm going to set at 2 millimeters, so it's 1 millimeter outside and 1 millimeter inside, and we're going to paint this we're just going to overlap this because this becomes a cutting tool for our teeth. I'll just take this, and we can expose the teeth, just to see where we're putting these, how we're designing this cutting tool. So we'll just have a look here. There we go. Okay, so I want to make sure that this red layer is underneath my denture teeth. Okay, so which it seems to be. I think it's all good. So we're going to accept this layer, and I'm not going to smooth it because it's just a cutting tool. So I'm going to finish this layer, and again we're going to do a bit of object management. Whenever you create an object, think about the object management, which is vitally important. So I'll just make this blue for now. And I'm going to put it into a new collection, and I'll call that cutter or something. Cutter. That's going to be my cutter, and I'm going to hide this cutter away for now. Next, I'm going to make my denture base. So we're going to go back to the paint on layer, which is over here. I've just got to shift this zoom thing away. It's in my way, like this. Okay. So it's still the target model, and I'm going to click on paint on layer. All right, and we're going to just continue making our denture. So this is a bit like putting acrylic onto a model. And if this was Valplast, we could come over and cover that retentive area of that tooth. Now, if you make a blob and you make a mistake, click on the minus sign, and that will get rid of your mistake. Okay. We've got a little icon on this side, on the right-hand side, to hide the thickness of it. So you don't have to see the thickness of it. And additionally to that, if you do want to see the thickness to it, you can go into wireframe mode as well, and you can paint in wireframe mode. So that gives you a good idea of how thick you're actually painting. So let's just keep it on texture mode for now. It's just some information. So here I'm going to take this up, and I'm going to overlay the back a little bit so we could have a bit of a clasping effect or something. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about the occlusion now. And the occlusion, you know, if this interferes with the occlusion, it's easily solved right at the end. You can just cut the occlusion. Note that I'm taking this up above to my contact area, like that. All right, so I think that should do it. Okay. So here we're going to click on accept layer, but this time around I'm going to smooth it a little bit. Smooth, because we want a nice clean mesh. Yeah, something like that. Smooth that clasp. Wolfgang, we should do a chrome cobalt maybe next week.
I think so, but
That would be.
we probably want to include some patterns of different clasps and things. I don't know.
Yeah. Now I could have maybe come a little bit further down. So that's okay. We're going to exit. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to finish this layer. And over here, for example, I can still bring it down because all I need to do is make sure the proportional editing tool is on, and then use the G key and just pull it down a bit. So that's quite easy to do like that. All right. So that's looking okay. And I'm going to just change the color to make it a little bit pinkish like that. That'll be okay. Now the fitting surface has not been cut. We always cut that right at the end. Okay. So let's continue. I'm going to hide this layer. So I'm going to put it into a new collection and just say, okay, this is my denture base. Denture base, okay. And I'm going to hide this denture base for now. And I'm going to expose my teeth, my denture teeth over here. And you can see how they collide with the model. And this is why we've actually made a cutter. So this is our cutter. And I'm going to cut the bottom of, I'm going to use the blue one as my cutter for Boolean. So we're going to go to the cutting tools. And this becomes my object being cut. Select object being cut is this one here, and this is the object making the cut. Okay, so let's cut it, and we're going to apply that. And theoretically, I could get rid of the cutter, but I'll just hide it for now. And if you look carefully, it's all being cut off. Okay. So now I'm looking at this unit and I'm thinking, okay, well, but look at all of this rubbish on the inside, the interproximal spaces and so on. We don't want triangles in there, do we? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the model designer, and in the model designer, we've got this beautiful tool called Patch Up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor, shift right click my cursor, and I'm going to click on Patch Up. And this makes like a ball. And it's like, I love this, Wolfgang. It's
Yeah,
like
same.
wax. It's just so amazing. Look how it joins up like
Yeah,
fluid.
it's incredible.
I just love, I enjoy that. Okay. And then we're going to click on fill, and that fills that up. I'm going to do the same on this side. So we're going to, actually we could have just duplicated that just by using Shift D.
Can you put a matte cap onto this model, Michael? When you're
Yeah, of
done,
course.
so I can just check it better.
Shift D, like that. Like that. We're going to, Shift D, it just duplicates this. Something like that. That'll be good. All right, we're going to click on fill. That's good. And I will also, yeah, okay, you want a matte cap on there. Okay, now it's super white. Is that blinding you a little bit?
No, it's all right. Eh?
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just give this a little bit of a smooth. So in the model designer, we've got these sculpting things all over the show. They all basically do the same thing. We'll just sculpt this nicely because this is going to be part of our denture. So we don't want the patient to attract food and stuff in there. So, all right, so that's looking really good. I like that. Yeah, that's good. Exit that. Now, to keep this in the denture base, we should actually put some retention in there. So I'm going to go Control I and hide it. We'll take this and again, put my cursor down. We're going to go back to the patch up tool. But this time around, I'm going to scale this. Shift D, Shift D, Shift D. This time around, what we're going to do, instead of filling it, we're going to carve it out. So carve, okay? That's made like retention, internal retention. So basically what I want to do is I just want to neaten this up a little because when we're printing this, we always have to think about, you know, our geometry and how things look and so on. Okay, that's that. We've got a little bit of a blob there. Take that away. Just do the contact a little bit like that. All right, so that's looking good. Now I'm quite happy for this to be my unit and my denture. So okay, so now there's one step left to do. Just hide all these other models. All right, and this one as well we can hide. Oh, where's my base gone? Somewhere. somewhere over here, my layer. Here, okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Splint module, and we've also got it in the Wax Up module. Right at the bottom in our cutting tools, we can, this becomes our object being cut. Now the menu with the pink, what it actually does, it doesn't only do a Boolean cutting procedure. It actually takes the object that makes the cut, it duplicates it, it offsets it by your required amount, and then it cuts it out, because we need a gap. We need an offset spacer to make anything fit into anything. Because when we're printing at 50 microns or whatever, you can't have one surface on top of the other. Like a cylinder wouldn't fit into a tube if they are surface to surface. That's why we always have to have an engineering fit. So, okay, this becomes our object being cut. And then this one becomes our object making the cut. So that, what that does, it duplicates this object and it offsets it. You can see the offset here at 0.1 millimeters. Now, you can set that to whatever you want. Okay, so, but 0.1 millimeters is quite good. Okay, we're going to apply that. And that will then remesh our cutter. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply this. Okay. So now this is actually, if you look very carefully here, it's got like a 0.1 millimeter clearance between our teeth and our denture base. So if I grab this upwards, okay, we've got our retention and we've got our teeth, which we can print separately, and we can put this into our denture base. So lastly, lucky last, we need to cut out our fitting model. So this is our passive model. We don't need it. And in the previous file, I actually deleted it, but because we've actually called up a new file, and it's still there, so I'm going to take this away. So the target model is the one that we need. So what we're going to do is in the Splint module, we can simply go to the cut fitting surface, or we can choose these. Select object being cut, which is the pink one. And then we're going to we can just type in or look it up, target model. Okay, so I haven't applied it yet, but what I want to see is I want to hide everything else to see whether it is cut. Okay, so it's perfectly cut, as you can see, and I'm going to apply this cut. Perfect. Okay, so I've moved this model. Okay, hide. Okay, so there we got. Here we've got our denture. We could still cut the contact over here and maybe over there, I don't know, but let's do that. So select object being cut, and I'm going to look for my target model. All right, so you see how that's cut it out perfectly. It's also cut it out there. So these little things, please don't forget these things. It's easy to forget, and then you have to go back with a handpiece and then trim it and so on. But if you're careful and you look at all these cutters, every single one that needs to be trimmed, then we don't have to hopefully do anything on our denture. All right, so that's it.
Yep.
Cool. Are there any questions related with this? It's
Guys,
quite
I'm
easy
just
to make.
opening the microphone, so feel free to ask Mark a question. Something he can't answer, hopefully.
So regarding your experience, this is always good to use this cutter, this blue one, which you introduced at the first one, with when working with partials. Yeah.
Yeah, also with full dentures, because we need the teeth to come up from the model. And we do this in the lab as well. We buy a set of teeth, and the first thing that we do is we grind the hell out of the bottom of the teeth to make them fit.
Yeah.
Luckily here we don't have to get our hands dirty.
Yeah. I might have also a question. When you separate those natural tooths from the model, is there a possibility that in a wax up model I saw that there is a possibility